Hi everyone, I'm Jamie Gravel. I'm the social media strategist for the International Literacy Association. Thank you for joining us for a Hangout on Air with Pernille Rip, Stephen Lane, and Jennifer Estrada. Tonight we're going to discuss the benefits of reading aloud, the impact a read aloud can have outside of your classroom. Our guests will also share their favorite books, and we're also very excited that we have 3 copies of Stephen Lane's book to give away. Our guests are going to be taking your questions at the end, the last couple of minutes of our discussion. So don't forget to tweet along with us using hashtag ILA Hangout. And also, by using this hashtag, you will be entered to win one of Dr. Lane's books. So you guys are not here to listen to me talk, so let's take a minute getting to know our panelists. Pernille, why don't we begin with you?
Hi, yeah, thank you. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm not quite sure why I'm here because these 2 other people are who I'm here to listen to. But my name's Pernille Rip. I'm a 7th grade ELA teacher in Oregon, Wisconsin, and I created the Global Read Aloud in 2010, which since then has connected more than 1 million kids in the pursuit of making the world a little bit smaller through Read Aloud. And yeah, I have an awesome job, so yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Stephen, how about you? A little background about yourself?
Hi, well, I'm Steve Lane. I'm glad to be here tonight. Pernille, I think you're here because of Global Read Aloud, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say. I work at Judson University outside of Chicago. I direct a master's and doctoral program in literacy education and love to talk about literacy practices with kids. I was an elementary teacher, K2, 3, and 5 for 7 years, and a junior high school teacher for 8 years. So my heart's in the classroom with the kids, even though I'm at the university now.
Jennifer?
Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Estrada. I'm also very excited to be here and to listen to both of you guys. I am currently the director of the Her Story campaign for Lit World and Global Glow, 2 great organizations that I'm lucky to work for that are working together to expand the work they're able to do with communities of women and girls around the world. I've been working in the field of literacy for about 8 years now, and was a part of the original Lit World team, so was part of the team that launched World Read Aloud Day, and Lit World is very excited to be part of this Google Hangout on the eve of the 7th annual World Read Aloud Day. So I'm really looking forward to talking about this really important topic and thinking together about all of the ways that reading aloud has a huge impact on our children and communities of all ages around the world.
Great, and Jennifer neglected to mention that she was a member of the inaugural 30 Under 30 class, so she's a little humble, but thank you for everything that everybody does. Why don't we get started? We'll jump right in with our first question. So it's pretty obvious, this is what we're here to talk about. Why is reading aloud so important? Steve, we'll start with you, please.
Well, I think there are a million answers to that question, obviously, but I think sometimes the thing that gets overlooked, especially by people who aren't literacy people, and we're surrounded by them in our schools, sometimes our colleagues, administrators, or even parents, they can look at reading aloud as just a use of time or something that's not instructionally valuable. But when you think about the benefits for comprehension, the benefits, having a model of prosody, a prosodic reader in front of you every day for kids at any grade level, the impact of cultural sensitivity and what you can do, because there's that rapport that's built when you read aloud. You're drawing that group of kids together. You're drawing them together not just with you, the teacher, but as a community. And so you're able to look at such deep things with kids. And yeah, you can laugh and read humorous books, but you can also read books and experience things with kids where you can ask some of these big questions. You know, how did she get into this mess? Or what did he do that got himself in this situation? And from that, you can talk about some difficult topics without passing judgment on kids who might be dealing with some of those same kinds of issues. It builds vocabulary. I mean, I could go on and on, but I think our other panelists have some good ideas too. There are just so many great benefits.
Okay, Jennifer, why don't you give us your answer?
Sure, and I couldn't agree more there. The list of benefits to reading aloud just goes on and on and on. One thing that I would also like to touch on in the way that sometimes reading aloud is overlooked is that it's a really stress-free, joyful way for kids and young people, young adults, to engage with text and celebrate language without having to worry about taking on the stress of their own fluency or their own ability to pronounce words properly. So it's a fun way of building literacy skills that doesn't put any stress on the kids, and it's a really cozy activity. It's a way that we can bond together and create a special community around reading and around the act of sharing stories. I think a big part of reading aloud too is that it opens up text that might not be otherwise accessible for kids, and especially if there is something, as Steve mentioned, a topic that is on a child's mind, or something that you've experienced as a community that you want to talk about and think about. The right read aloud in that moment can be a really helpful tool for starting that conversation. And I think another thing that is really special about reading aloud is how it allows both the reader and the listener to practice so many skills around reading. It's a complete literacy activity in that you are someone is obviously doing the reading. There's also the speaking and listening elements that come into play. So kids are building these listening skills that are so foundational to their reading lives. And in that process, they're hearing from someone who's showing how much they value reading and how important it is to them, and not just for themselves, but also for the child to have that experience. So the joy and that warmth that comes from reading aloud makes it really special.
Apparently I didn't mute my microphone. I'm so sorry. I feel bad about that. Yes, to what Jennifer and Stephen have said as well is so paramount to what we do. And I think moving into middle school too, read aloud becomes the great equalizer. And it reminds children that reading aloud is something magical. And so when I think about how we start our first day of the year, we read aloud a picture book. And I think it all of a sudden removes barriers that kids come to us with what reading should look like. And so I think when we take the power of the read aloud within our own community and then use it to tear down walls around the world to build empathy for others, that's when we truly see even more so the power of read aloud magnified across the world. And so I think of the gift that we can give kids with doing all of the things that we can do with a read aloud, but simply also having that shared experience and showing them that they're sharing this experience with other students around the world is what can help students re-fall in love with reading as a solitary endeavor as well. And so reading aloud, I think, often is shoved to the side in upper and secondary school, and I'd actually say that those kids need it more than even elementary kids, because that's when we lose students, and that's when we get disengaged kids, and reading aloud gives us the magic to bring those kids back.
Okay, Praneel, you touched actually on our next question. We've all discussed the benefits of reading aloud in the classroom, but how do you stress the importance of bringing the read aloud into the middle and high school classrooms? Jennifer, why don't we begin with you?
Yes, definitely, and this is a question that feels especially important as kids get older. Often they're really encouraged to sit by themselves, read by themselves, and reading suddenly becomes an activity that separates us instead of bringing us together the way it did when we're young. And it doesn't have to be that way. You know, it's a choice that we make. And there's a place for independent reading, but there's also a place for the read aloud at every age and in every community. And as Pernil touched on, you know, as kids get older and they're thinking about more complex topics, they're dealing with challenges in their own life, they're watching their friends and people in their community and beginning to understand more deeply what's going on around them. The read aloud is an amazing tool to explore these ideas, to open up dialogue around topics that feel hard, and to really create a safe space for kids to ask questions and learn and reflect with a supportive adult in their life, or in some cases a supportive near peer or even peer, and to provide that space and that time for reading aloud and to value it in that way is really magical. And I love that word. I love that you use that word, Pernil. And so the benefits really of the read aloud don't have an age limit. They continue to support deep learning and thinking as kids grow into adolescents and young adults. And if we think about how we can really support that and hold on to that, I would look at what we do when kids are young. We create a lot of rituals around reading aloud. It has a special time. We attach it to other daily activities. It becomes a part of our daily routine, and a natural part of every day. And that doesn't have to stop. That can easily continue into young adulthood. I was reading something recently, a Scholastic report where they polled kids from 6 to 17 all the way through high school, and across age groups, 83% of kids said they love being read aloud to. Love it. It's powerful, and adults often feel the same way. You know, when someone is reading me a story, reading me a text, it's a very peaceful moment in my daily life. And just one more way that we can really hold on to that and stress the importance is, I would say, by celebrating reading aloud and celebrating World Read Aloud Day with us. I would encourage everyone to do that. It's a great way to hold on to that joy around reading aloud and what it means to be a reader, and participate in something that spans the globe. That worldwide, international element of the day is especially exciting for our middle and high schoolers to feel like they're a part of something, that they're taking action in a way. And the celebration is, you know, at this, in its 7th year, we're in 100 countries and millions of people are participating, so it's really fun to see how your experience and your activities connect to others. And you know, we use social media to share a lot about World Read Aloud Day, but that's a tool that can be used to really promote reading aloud especially for middle and high schoolers who love their social media, to show in the forums that they're already in, you know, people of all ages participating in reading aloud, valuing it, having fun with it. That's a great way to use the spaces and the tools that are already important for kids of that age and continue to show that we value read aloud.
Steve, what do you think? Should high school students and middle school students be engaged in read alouds?
I think you're going to get a hearty yes from all of us on that, and I certainly agree with all the points that Jennifer made. My concern always is that I think there are a lot of people who work in secondary schools, be it high school or middle school, who don't necessarily see that value. And when we talk about some of the affective benefits, building rapport, and it's so enjoyable, and these things are all true. And those of us who are advocates We know they're true because we see it happen in the classroom with kids, that magic that's been spoken of. But in my experience, that's not the language that goes over well with people who are questioning your practice. If they're doubtful or dubious about this, and that often happens at the secondary level, they don't want to hear a lot of times, well, it builds this great rapport and community and yada, yada, yada. They say, you don't understand, I have all this content to cover. You don't understand, I have all these important things to do. There isn't time for that because I have instruction. And what they're missing is the instructive elements of the read aloud. So a great example at the secondary level that I often use is thinking about helping kids understand text type and looking at the different types of text that are available. I was working with some high school students just a couple months ago, and I used some passages from Alan Wolf's phenomenal The Watch That Ends the Night. And I had the whole room mesmerized, and I said, does anybody know the kind of text I'm reading from? And the response was, well, a book. And I said, well, yes, it's a book, but do you know anything about the way the text is organized? Let me show you. And I put it on the document camera, and it's a verse novel. And the kids were amazed. There's all this white space, and someone said, well, it's a poem, but it didn't sound like a poem when you... So we were able to have this really awesome conversation about different text types. This is just one example that we could use. And for some kids, sometimes just introducing some different text types in a way like that can make something a little more amenable, a little friendlier than they might have thought of before. And that's significant, I think, to bring something like that forward. The same can be true with nonfiction. Launching a topic, high school social studies teacher is a great example. A colleague asked me to come in and do some work in the high school social studies classroom, and I brought in a poem by Sarah Holbrook. And I said, hey, let's start this class. I'm going to read aloud something to you. And nobody was interested till I told them the title of the poem was Naked. And now we have a whole bevy of high school kids who can't wait to hear the poem Naked. And it's quite humorous in the beginning, but it turns midway to something very, very serious as our narrator, who's a young 5th grade girl, wondering what men look like naked, she finally finds out, but she finds out in a World War II documentary at school where she sees concentration camp victims. And it was interesting to watch the emotional, and the teacher afterwards said to me, I never would have thought you could read aloud something to a group of high school kids and interest them. We're going to use this now, obviously, to launch our World War II unit. So it was very instructive for him and for the other teachers I was then working with to say, do you see how when we talk about reading aloud on the secondary level, it doesn't always have to be an entire novel. We understand you have content to teach. We understand all this, but there are so many different uses and ways to engage an audience if you're willing to be open to thinking about this. The other thing that I'll just mention briefly is reading skills. And when you're reading text aloud to kids at any level, but particularly with older kids, you're going to stop and you're going to ask some pretty significant questions. Frequently, the question you're asking is tied to a reading skill. And I don't know if that's always clear.
Okay.
Great.
The last couple seconds were a little.
Yeah.
I missed the last couple minutes of that, but we will just move on, if that's okay, to our next question, which sort of piggybacks off of. Oh my gosh, Pernille, did I just cut you off? Okay.
No, I think they said it beautifully. Only last thing I want to say is that we assume that all students in middle and high school can access the text we give them in hand, and many of them can't. And so we need to create pockets of read aloud for the students that need access to the text in a different way. And read aloud provides us with that pathway so that all students can do the tasks we ask them, even if they can't read at a certain level.
Okay, I'm sorry again, Pernille. Okay, so let's move on to the next question, which piggybacks off our last discussion topic. Do you suggest that students who are able to read independently continue to be engaged in Read Aloud? Pernille, I will not. I will stop talking now. It is your turn, and the floor is yours.
But of course, because it's one other reading experience that will strengthen them as readers. And I think we see it in elementary school, and I used to teach elementary school, where they get so proud when they no longer need the read aloud. But then I think we need to cultivate the joy of the read aloud, and so that they still want the read aloud for the shared experience and for all of the things that we can teach them instead. So just like Jennifer said, yes, we still need independent reading, but we certainly also need this other social aspect of read aloud. And I think about my middle schoolers who tend to function in a world that's very connected through a device, but maybe not so connected face to face. And so we need to give students practice in reading aloud to each other, but also having that shared community experience so that they can be good human beings that know how to be around other human beings.
Great. Dr. Lean, what do you think?
I agree completely. I just think it's significant for us to keep in mind the gains that we've talked about already, and that none of that changes no matter the setting of elementary, middle, or high school. This is a way, reading aloud is a way of reaching those kids and bringing them, if you will, into the fold of learning. We have kids that are so disengaged with things that are going on in school, and when you think about the amount of time spent in text in school, the amount of time that we're asking kids to perform academically with text, if kids don't engage well with text, if they don't read well for that matter, why would coming to school be something that you would enjoy doing? But when we take an opportunity to bring the text to them, kind of on that incremental scale of, you know, I hate books, I hate text, and I won't read, I won't do it, and then you've got over here on the other end, the kid who's reading during math class and trying to hide the book. The goal needs to be to move those kids incrementally in a positive direction. It's not that we're going to turn everybody into a voracious reader maybe, but we want to move them in a good direction. And there's no way you can convince me that bringing text to kids that they're going to enjoy isn't going to slowly begin, okay, so maybe all books aren't bad. Gee, the one my teacher, he knows the really good ones, so maybe I don't like any other books, but I like the ones my teacher picks. Well, maybe over time that starts to move to, wow, the teacher read this amazing novel by Joan Bauer, and then we talked about Joan Bauer, and I found out she's written other books, and maybe I'm going to check one out of the library. And maybe, okay, so I still say I hate reading, but I like the books my teacher reads aloud, and I like books by Joan Bauer. And so we start to see a little bit of that incremental shift. The other thing that I think is significant to think about is, and I mentioned this in the beginning, providing a model of prosody is so significant, particularly with older kids. The way you speak, people make decisions about the way you speak. Doors open and close because of the way you present yourself. And so providing a prosodic model and talking about the use of inflection and the way you color a word when you read it aloud, talking with kids about that and giving them opportunities to do that in their public speaking classes or wherever they may be is extremely valuable, and it's extremely powerful for kids, and I would advocate we don't do enough of it.
Jennifer, do you want to chime in?
Sure. I think it's great to listen and to hear you both speak about these topics. They're definitely near to my heart, and you know, I am in very strong agreement with both of you. I think the biggest misconception about the read aloud is that the benefits stop when children know how to read or can read independently, and that's not true. Mostly because what we're asking of kids as they get older is much more. We continue to ask them to engage in our communities more, to take more responsibility for themselves and for others, and the space of the read aloud, both as a tool to explore content, but also a tool to explore perspective, and to think about the way that people engage with one another through story, using the story as a safe space to think about decision making, to think about ways of treating one another. It's a very powerful tool, and it's useful both from an education standpoint and also within communities. It's a tool that anyone can use to have a conversation with a young person or even with another adult. Sometimes sharing text, sharing a story, using a story as a frame of reference can be a really useful and powerful way to start a difficult conversation. And I just to think a little bit more about what Stephen was sharing about the models that we get in a read aloud. We're also modeling what strong readers do in reading aloud, and that's one of the big reasons why we do it with our kids, why we do it with little ones. But as the text gets more complicated, older kids still need that guidance, still need that modeling and encouragement. What do you do when a text gets really complicated? How do you deconstruct it? How do you get access to it? What are the things we can do? And using dialogue as one of those tools to really gain access to a text that suddenly feels challenging is a really powerful element of the read aloud. And I think one last thing, it makes me think about at Lit World we talk a lot about serious joy, and how we really advocate for joy in learning and joyful learning practices. And sometimes when people hear that, they think that we're kind of taking things lightly, but we talk about serious joy because we take the joyfulness of learning and the joyfulness of literacy very seriously. We feel strongly that everyone deserves to have a joyful experience around learning and reading. And as our kids get older, especially, there's a lot of stress in the practice of reading. They're reading in classrooms. They're reading texts that maybe are sometimes feel complicated. The language is different than what they hear on an everyday basis. And so what Stephen was talking about as well, about the accessibility of the read aloud, is really essential, both for the content that it allows access to, but also the stress-free moment, that pause, that calm in the life of a young adult that the read aloud gives is an incredible psychological benefit. It's a mental health benefit that we can't underestimate, especially in a time in our kids' lives where they're experiencing a lot, they're changing a lot, they're thinking a lot about things, and the read aloud can really be a peaceful moment for reflection and reconnection.
Great. Did we lose our fourth expert, Purnell? No.
It was about to be a gigantic, group of children overtaking.
Oh.
He was talking the whole time and waving, so sorry.
He's excited. He loves to be...
He loves read aloud.
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess I'll take a minute to let everybody know that we are a little bit past the halfway point. So remember, if you have not tweeted us your questions yet, please do so using the hashtag ILA Hangout. Ask us your questions, just send us your comments. If there's anything you would like us to discuss, please don't hesitate to let us know. And we also have 3 copies of In Defense of Read Aloud, and we are giving those away at the end also. So please make sure you're using the hashtag and you're staying engaged on Twitter. And with that, we will move on to our next question. Let's see, who are we going to start with this time? Stephen, we will start with you. What do you think, or should students be able to follow along with their own copy of a read aloud or not?
I'm so excited to answer this question. They absolutely should be allowed to. but they should not be required to. There aren't a lot of things instructionally that I kind of am black and white on, or that I tell people, no, I'm right about this. But when it comes to this issue, I really have a passion about it, because I feel that the kids we're trying to engage, I mean, when I'm reading aloud, I'm trying to really pull this community of kids together, whether they're kindergartners or ninth graders, I don't care. And for those kids that don't do text, those kids that don't do books, as soon as I say, you will now hold this book in your hand, I've lost some of those kids. They're already angry. They don't want to. So just because we have 26 copies of whatever in the classroom doesn't mean we automatically shove them into everybody's hand and make them follow along. Think how much they follow along all day long. They're following along in text constantly, in math, in foreign language, in social studies. They're always following along. So I don't want to turn kids off by requiring it, but I absolutely want to make the text available. If we have the books, let's not have them sitting in the book room. Let's get them out, have them in the classroom, and say to the kids, anybody wants to follow along, anytime, grab a book. And that gives me an opportunity as the master teacher to notice William, who doesn't like to read, go and perhaps pick up a book one day and follow along. And now I have something to talk about in the teacher's lounge that's actually worth talking about. And tomorrow, William may not. He may not pick that book up again tomorrow. I don't care, because 5 days later he may pick it up again. So yeah, I'm really pretty passionate on that subject. I'll get quiet now.
Jennifer, what do you think?
So I completely agree, and I think really you have to know your audience, know your kids, and also it depends on what you're trying to accomplish as a teacher, or even in a community. If your goal is to engage and to bring a community together and create a safe space and a quiet moment, or even to get kids excited about a topic or a new idea, the idea of having a copy in your hand maybe is exciting for some kids, but it's definitely not essential to what your goal is for that community. Now, if you have a very specific learning goal, and the visual of the text supports that, or if your kids just love to have the books in their hand and feel, like stronger readers when they do, there are definitely benefits to having copies for the kids. I would say this: having a copy of a book for every child doesn't mean that, or doesn't mean that you can't do a read aloud. Even if everyone has the book, that doesn't mean that you can't take the read aloud on, which is sometimes, I think, gets forgotten if independent reading is an option. And I think also, if you don't have copies for every child, that doesn't mean you can't do a read aloud either, which is another thing that I think sometimes we limit ourselves. I don't have enough of this, or I don't, have the right tool here. Anyone can read aloud, whether they have 15 copies or just one. And especially, I think the point about choice is really the key here. A big thing that turns kids off to reading is that lack of agency, the lack of choice that they have in their reading lives as they get older. So it's a very empowering thing to say, you can read along with me or you don't have to, but really this is just about me sharing this text, this story with you, and it becomes a gift that you can give as someone reading aloud. And that's a nice thing, I think, for kids of all ages to experience. So I don't think there's a hard and fast answer to this. I think it's more about your kids and your community.
Pernille, I'm sorry, but we can't hear you. Did you unmute your microphone? Uh-oh. Okay, do you want to try again? We'll see if we can hear you. Uh-oh, it looks like we may have lost Pernille, but I'm sure she will return. This next question actually is inspired by her project. Jennifer, I will just, is she back? Oh, you're back.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. Very short because I don't want to run over time, but to me it's always, you know what? Why would you want to spend that much money on one copy of or one type of book when you could buy 200 copies of different books for kids to enjoy? And I love Steve's answer because I think that's the right approach. Also, we tend to take Read Aloud and make it into so many things, whereas we forget that the point of Read Aloud is deep engagement with the text. And again, all of the other benefits that we have. And if you're constantly asking kids to do things while they're reading aloud, they're going to lose out on the experience of the Read Aloud. So no, and for people that do global Read Aloud or anything like that, I always tell them you only need one copy of the book. If you can get more, great. But other than that, you're fine.
Okay, now I'm the one that can't remember how to unmute my microphone. Jennifer, I will begin with you for this question. In what ways do you think a Read Aloud can build or strengthen a community?
Well, I think there are many ways, from small to big, that Read Aloud creates communities and really strengthens the communities. Just thinking about it in its simplest form, I would say, the Read Aloud creates that safe space between the reader and the listener, and that's an immediate. That's one of the first experiences of reading community that many of us have is the Read Aloud that we get as a very small child. It's often an intergenerational experience, so we're building connections across ages. And if we think about that, if we build out from that, every other experience of reading aloud is building on that initial that small scale experience. So that's the physical process of reading aloud. It's a community experience. Whether you're sharing it with one person or many people, you're sharing that experience, you're sharing that story. And stories are powerful. They create understanding. They allow us to tap into other people's perspectives, especially if you're in a community that is really diverse, to have the opportunity to hear voices that are different from your own, to hear viewpoints that are different from your own, and really consider them, reflect on them, engage with them in positive ways is a powerful community building element to the Read Aloud. But also, many of the communities that we work in globally are incredibly isolated. The kids, really do spend most of their lives in one place with one group of people, and the act of reading aloud is a window into many different worlds, and an opportunity to engage with those worlds, to be a part of them for the moment of the Read Aloud, and also for the moments that continue after that Read Aloud, as we take in those stories and make them a part of our own experience. And because the Read Aloud is oral, and it is in its essence a dialogue between the reader and the story and the listeners, it opens up dialogue around the story, and it creates opportunities for conversation that might not otherwise exist. And I think in that dialogue and in those conversations, that's another way that we build and strengthen our community. because it creates that understanding, it creates that space for understanding. And I wanted to give an example of how the Read Aloud can forge unlikely community from this year's actually celebration of World Read Aloud Day. In Colombia, we are working with a few different local nonprofits that are wonderful, and they have organized a celebration where they've asked many different members of the community, groups within the community, to participate. And one group that they asked was the police officers, the police station. And the station agreed to participate, and they're having all of their police officers read to people who are in prison on World Read Aloud Day. And they're also going to be letting the inmates read aloud to one another and read back to the guards, and in this way have really embraced a new level of their own, of this community that's really hard. It's a really hard community to be a part of, but the Read Aloud is bringing them together, and we're really inspired by that choice that our partners have made to bring the Read Aloud into this community. And so I think it's a testament to the power of community building that can come when we read aloud.
Dr. Lane, how have you seen a read aloud strengthen a community?
Well, what comes to my mind right away is the use of programs like One Author, One School, which I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers are very familiar with. You see such power in elementary, middle, high school with those kinds of pulling together of a community when you have one author, one school, and they're studying the work of an author for an entire year, and right away you consider Read Aloud is the most powerful way of drawing that entire school community together. We have cities, towns, villages that do, one book, one city. Naperville, Illinois, here where I live, has had a program like that often, where they're asking everyone to read aloud, to join together, but it's frequently the oral delivery of the text that you see books draw people together in general, but when someone's willing to orally deliver it, you reach more people, because there are those people who, for a variety of reasons, don't pick up and engage with text. And I think as we start to think about older students or even adult learners, it can be very easy for literacy people to forget that for those who are not literate or are not strong in their literacy, when you have some kind of a community movement, they're left out unless there is an option for oral delivery of that text. Even if it's from an audiobook, that's still someone reading aloud. So I think that's what comes to my mind right away as one of the most significant ways of drawing people together.
Pernille, I didn't want to start talking in case you were going to start talking and duplicate our last mistake. So did you want to add to that conversation? I'm sorry, but we're having that same issue where we can't hear you. I'm sorry. Okay. Let's move on. I'm sure Pernille will be back because I know she has a lot of great experience to share with us on building a community. So since we only have a couple minutes left, let's move on to sort of a lightning round where we will have Jennifer and Dr. Lane share their favorite read-alouds for the classroom. Okay. Take that back. Let's ask Pernille what she thinks.
I'm so sorry. My cable company will be getting a call. I'll make it short. On the eve of the French terrorist attacks in Paris, when I sat at my kitchen counter trying to make sense of the world and all the evil that seems to be in it, I received an email from a teacher, and she shared a story from the Global Read Aloud, which was just ending that week. And she said, you know, for 6 weeks we've been connecting with a classroom in California, and my students and I have Skyped, or I'm sorry, have sent things back and forth. And today we had our culminating Skype call. It was the first time that we got to see the kids that we felt so connected to. My students didn't know that who they'd been connecting to was a Muslim charter school in California. And when they saw those kids, and they saw the teacher in the Muslim traditional outfit, their world stood still, because they couldn't believe that what they knew about Muslims was now completely turned upside down. And so when I think about the read aloud and the power to change the world, those are the stories that come to mind. We can take a book and we can make connections and we can change our world and we can inspire our children to look at people differently because we give them a shared experience.
I'm glad you were able to come back for that. That was a really powerful example, so thank you. Now we will move on to a lightning round where everyone will share just a couple of their favorite titles for reading aloud. And viewers, if you don't have pen and paper available or if you can't type fast enough, don't worry, we will have a list and we will share it on social media and on our blog. So why don't we, Praneel, why don't you kick this off, please?
This was so incredibly hard, especially as I'm in the midst of picking Global Read Aloud finalists and contenders, so I'll go quick. Pax by Sarah Pennypacker is one of the must-reads of 2016 if you teach 4th grade and up. It's absolutely incredible. 2 perspectives told from a boy and his fox. My middle school read I cannot keep for more than 5 minutes. I would say 50% of my 7th graders have read Orbiting Jupiter by Gary D. Schmidt. Some are listening to it on Audible. This book is turning non-readers into kids who believe they're readers. I'm so proud of the conversations that All American Boys has started by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley. We needed this book. It is a hard book to read, especially as a white educator who knows so little about what it means to be a minority. But this is the book that many students need to read, especially kids who otherwise are not in any way part of these situations because they need to know what's happening in the world. Picture books was a lot harder, so I picked some of my favorites from around the house. Strictly No Elephants is incredible. It's one that my students love and that my own children love. I have to go with Madison Native, of course, Kevin Henkes and Waiting. It is an incredible book. Again, this one is appropriate for all kids, including middle schoolers and high schoolers. We Forgot Brock brings back so many memories of imaginary friends and all of the conversations about community. And then this book just came out, and it's called The Night Gardener. And it is absolutely gorgeous. The illustrations are incredible, as well as the message within the story. And then I have to give a final shout out. Today I used The Heart in the Bottle by Oliver Jeffers for theme with my 7th graders, and they couldn't believe how incredible it was.
Okay, looks like Jennifer might be trying to hunt down some books. So Dr. Lane, why don't we ask you what your suggestions are?
I was going to go hunting too to grab them because I didn't have hard copies with me, but I'm going to throw out, first of all, for the high school, I mentioned already, The Watch That Ends the Night by Alan Wolfe, which is just a masterpiece of writing, like no other book that I have ever read. Very powerful, very taut verse, looking at the sinking of the Titanic, and even the iceberg is a character in this novel. So The Watch That Ends the Night. Another one for late middle school, maybe 8th grade, definitely high school, is Nancy Werland's masterpiece, The Rules of Survival, one of my all-time favorite books. Very tough book to read, no doubt. Very powerful book, though. I often say if I was superintendent of the world, there are a few books that everybody has to read, whether you teach kindergarten or 12th grade, and that's one of those books because it's such a tough reminder of the lives some kids are living. And I think teachers need to remember that things can be going on at home that we don't know about. And that book really, really brings it through. Joan Bauer, every single book she writes is a phenomenal read aloud. My particular favorite is her book Stand Tall, about a young man named Tree who is obviously very, very tall. and the story of what he's going through is very emotionally resonant for me. So great for middle school. Sue Staffaker's Donut Head, a favorite for the intermediate grades. I tried to think about some books that are easily accessible, but that a lot of people maybe haven't heard of. And Donut Head is a great one. A lot of humor, a lot of things that intermediate kids love. And then of all the picture books, the number one I had to grab was The Magic Hat by Mem Fox, which has the wonderful, wonderful rhyme and repetition, things that the young children love. They can immediately join in on, and it's just got such a lot of playful language, which Mem is known for. So those are the 4 I'll mention, or 5 out of 18 that I had on my list.
Jennifer, really quickly, do you want to run through your list?
Yes, so I was hunting. I found a couple of them, not all of them. I'm going to go in reverse order and start with the picture books that I love. And I just am an advocate for picture books at all ages. I think picture books often engage with themes in really thoughtful ways, and the accessibility of picture books is a boon for tougher themes, deeper thinking. This is one I love, called Exclamation Mark. Really just about finding your voice and finding your confidence, and really fun to read. Very playful, fun to read. I am a Peter H. Reynolds fan. I love him and I love his work, and I found 2 of my favorites, The Dot and Ish. Also another set of great books to read with young children, but also middle schoolers. Again, about figuring out who you are and being confident in that space. Another great book, recent find for me, is The Adventures of Beagle, the Unimaginary Friend. It's about an imaginary friend who goes and looks for his child to play with, because he's tired of waiting, and especially for our kids who maybe have trouble making friends, this is a really nice story. Thinking about the text for older children, I had a few, but one that I really love and want to advocate for is called Brown Girl Dreaming. It's written in free verse, so it's very poetic, about the life of Jacqueline Woodson, but also of any young girl growing up, and her experiences told in this really poetic form. It's fun to read aloud, and it's fun to listen to, and I think that's the win-win of the read aloud.
Okay, there's a lot of nodding heads, so I think everybody's in agreement that you have great taste. And we only have a couple minutes left, and we've had a lot of questions, but what I'm going to do is pick 3 questions and have just sort of assign them to one panelist so that we can just sort of wrap things up. And if you're watching and we didn't get to your question, we are not going to ignore you. We'll make sure that we answer them. We just won't be able to answer them live. So let's have our first question be from, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing any names, Misha Franks. She wants to know, how do we get more admin buy-in and even financial support for read alouds? Dr. Lean, why don't you give that a stab?
This is going to sound like shameless self-promotion, but I wrote the book In Defense of Read Aloud for that reason, because I felt like no one had really given teachers a way to hand somebody who's questioning them all of the research consumed in one place. Here it is. You want to argue with this? Hence the title In Defense. And I will just say that it took a long time to put this book together, because I pulled together the voices of leading scholars around the world. So there's an international scholar and then a local U.S. scholar in all of these, as well as some of the most outstanding authors in the country, and leaders of our professional organizations, ALA, ILA, NCTE, and I pulled everybody together to address this, because I knew my name alone wouldn't do it. So that was my answer to that very issue. I think you can't just For some people, like admin who won't buy in, you can't just stand and talk at them. You have to give them something. And sometimes it's the person from Ohio who's saying exactly what you've been saying, but they're from Ohio, so now everyone's going to listen.
Okay, thank you. And let me go back. And I know I'm going to mispronounce this name, so again, I apologize. Sachernka Anakasis. She says, "Hi everyone, I am late. How can we get children who never go to school into the great world of reading?" Jennifer, do you want to take that one?
Sure. And I want to say hi to Sasha. She didn't tell you, but she's listening in from Haiti. And
did I say her name right?
Well, I've actually never attempted to say her full name because it's hard to pronounce, but I'll ask her later. You know, I think honestly that is exactly why we do the read aloud, to bring kids who feel detached and disengaged from their learning lives into reading. And reading is really, in many ways, a gateway into so many other kinds of learning, because once you feel connected to that experience, it makes it that much easier to access the reading that we're asked to do in the different subject areas. So I would say, you know, if you can find a text or a topic that taps into the interest, the genuine interest of the child, that's the best way to begin that process. And by reading aloud, by saying to the child, you know, let me do the work, let me do the heavy lifting of reading this text, and I want you to enjoy what I'm sharing with you and enjoy this story, and together, you know, we can access this learning. That's a great entry point for kids. And I would add to that, building on that experience of the read aloud, offering access to texts that do feel genuinely interesting and are, you know, coming from the wants and needs of the children themselves, is a great way to build a love of independent reading as well. As kids get older, they're given books, they're told what they have to read, and that can create a lot of disengagement, especially if you're a struggling reader and the text that you're given is not just something you're not interested in, but also something that feels hard to navigate on your own. So I think the read aloud and the child's own voice in the reading process are the two tools I would recommend for that.
Great. Pernille, last but not least. I don't know why I picked the hardest names to answer. Sheskis would like to know how you feel about students who wish to draw during a read aloud. Do you agree with them being allowed to do other activities while listening?
Please, yes. In defense of doodlers everywhere, doodlers unite. I listen much better when I can doodle, and it's actually something that I've encouraged many students to do, as long as they are still paying attention. And for me, it's always to figure out how they learn best, because for some kids, drawing or doodling is a distraction, and for others, it's a way to focus them. It's much like when we use audiobooks with students. Some students benefit from having the book in their hands, and others benefit from simply sitting there. So for me, it's an opportunity for students to figure out how they learn best. Depends on the read aloud, though, as well. If it's a short read aloud where I need them to be super focused because we're going to quick talk about it, like a picture book, then probably not. But if it's a longer read aloud where they're following the intricate details of a story, please. We get too caught up in too many stupid rules in school. I think we should just stop.
Okay. So one final announcement before we wrap it up. We have 3 winners of the books, and those lucky winners are Riza, with the Twitter handle @RizaPichio, Misha Franks @FranksMisha, and Leslie Burnap at anti-res. So if you could send us a direct message with your mailing address, we will stick them in the mail for you and get them to you as soon as we can. But I would like to end tonight's hangout just by thanking our guests for joining us. This was a great conversation, and I hope everybody remembers that tomorrow is World Read Aloud Day. So we hope that whatever you learned tonight, you can put into practice tomorrow. People from around the globe will be participating in this, so we really hope that you can join. And with that, I thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time.